Hi, and welcome back to 10-Minute Bible. In this video series, we are looking at Luke's version of Jesus' life. There are 4 versions of Jesus' life in the Bible, in the New Testament, and Luke is the writer of one of them. So welcome, and thanks so much for joining in. In this particular video, we're going to be looking at the end of chapter 4, and then, if there's time, bridging over into the beginning of chapter 5. If you've seen the other videos, the first 6, this is number 7, I think. If you've seen the first 6, then that will be a bit helpful in terms of understanding what I'm saying today. But even if you haven't seen any of them, I think that this also will be a help to you, and I really hope it will be. So up till now, we've seen Jesus born of a kind of a remarkable way, one of a string of remarkable births in the Bible. This one, the most remarkable, spectacular of them all. We've seen a few little snapshots into Jesus's early life, and we've seen his validation on the part of the devout people of the devout Jewish people living in Israel about 2,000 years ago. And we've seen Jesus going public, being authorized also by God, being empowered by the Holy Spirit, and making a fresh start for the entire human community by, in a sense, revisiting the Garden of Eden and being tempted as in the first story in the Garden of Eden, way back at the beginning of the Bible. In that story, the first humans, as they are presented, cave in when they're tempted, and Jesus does not. So this signals something new and incredibly hopeful that God is doing through Jesus. Then Jesus starts going public, and it's not an altogether happy experience for him. He is in some places greatly appreciated, but in his hometown, there is a group, turns into a mob that we would say tries to lynch him. They try to push him off a high point in the land and try to kill him that way. Jesus, nevertheless, continues to move on, and we're going to look at the end of chapter 4, where Jesus does some impressive things, and then go to chapter 5, hopefully, where Jesus begins to start to bring together his first followers. So at the end of chapter 4, in the version of the Bible that I'm using, called The Message, the subtitle is "He Healed Them All." And if you take a look at that passage, it's not very long. I'm not going to read it, but I will, trust that you will take a look at it, or already have, and you discover that Jesus ends up going to. He's left the meeting place where Jewish people tend to meet, the synagogue probably, and he goes to the home of Peter, or Simon, as he's sometimes called. In this section, he's called Simon. And Simon's mother-in-law is there. Simon's mother-in-law is having a tough day. She's not feeling well. Jesus heals her. Now, this is interesting for probably the main reason is that he healed her, but I think also it's interesting to notice just details, going to the mother-in-law's home and running the fever. These kinds of personal details are all over the stories of Jesus, and they suggest very strongly eyewitnesses. And this is so important. The stories of Jesus are eyewitness accounts. If they weren't, it would be harder for you and I to really place a lot of confidence or trust in them. So there's mention there of a dinner and Simon's mother-in-law preparing it and that kind of thing. So that's all kind of neat. The sun goes down, and we discover that the house where Jesus is staying is kind of swamped with people who, at the end of the day, are bringing their sick friends and family members to Jesus for healing. By this time, Jesus is getting a bit of a reputation, or at least the word's getting out in that village, that Jesus can heal people. this is quite something in the pre-Jesus parts of the Bible. When God is on the move, when God shows up, then astounding things happen: healing, restoration, renewal for the community. And so this is what Jesus is up to. This renewal, this healing, not only extends to the physical world and to our emotional well-being and so on, but it also involves the demonic world, which is ultimately, in the biblical understandings, ultimately the source of our evils and our wrongs. And it says that demons left in droves. So physical healing, freedom from demonic influence on people, all this is kind of part of the swirl, of activity where Jesus is at the vortex, kind of exuding all this restoration and energy from God. And clearly for the Jewish people, for them, they clearly understand that this is God on the move. A little bit more about that in just one second. So this is a very interesting part of the story, because it says here that demons leave people. It's kind of an exorcism, we would call it. Demons are leaving people screaming, "Son of God, you're the Son of God." And it says that Jesus told them to be quiet, to shut them up, because the demons knew him to be the Messiah. This happens a number of times in the stories of Jesus, and this is not the only time where Jesus tells them to be quiet. You would think that Jesus would allow them to reveal who he is, but the idea is here that the reason that Jesus does not want this announcement to be made too often or too clearly that he is the Son of God, the Messiah, and so forth, is that this is a very volatile announcement. It's not only an announcement that God is at work through Jesus, but it's an announcement that Jesus is the leader who these poor Jewish folks who are occupied by the Romans, these poor Jewish folks are longing for freedom from political occupation and captivity. And so for them to hear that Jesus is the Messiah would be a bit politically volatile, and it's not yet time for Jesus to generate volatility in terms of the political implications or the political results of his activity. That will happen later on, and it will result in his death. But we will see that as the story progresses. So for the time being, Jesus has to quell, has to shut down, to calm down the explicit declarations identifying who he really is. Anyway, it says that he left the town the next day. He goes out to the open country, and their crowds are just following him. They're kind of clinging to him. They don't want him to leave, and understandably, they don't have a lot of doctors. They don't. So Jesus is healing them. He's releasing them from all kinds of emotional and mental and psychological and demonic influences. And anyway, he has to kind of stop and tell them, "Hey, don't you realize that I've got to move out to other places where I've got to tell the message of God's kingdom." Now, I like this saying that, where he says, "I've got to tell them the message of God's kingdom," because it reveals that the people would be understanding that Jesus is, through his actions and through his words, he is bringing on something of God. So God's kingdom, God's influence, God's reign, his rule is being revealed and exercised through Jesus. People understanding this, maybe not understanding all the full implications, but they understand it, and so there's that. Jesus is speaking to his own people who would know these things, the Jewish people. So then he continues to preach. It says in the meeting places in Galilee, so the synagogues, the Jewish meeting places in northern Israel. Okay, so we've got a bit of time, and so not much, but I want to push on a little bit to the next story, which brings us to the calling of some of the early disciples. So So again, we're going to see Simon. He's a fisherman, Simon Peter, and this time Jesus is at Lake Gennesaret, or the Sea of Galilee, in some of our Bible maps that you will see. And he's again quite popular, so popular that people are gathering at the lakeshore to hear him, but they're kind of crowding him off of the shore and into the water. So he sees a fishing boat. He uses it as a speaking platform, and from there he is teaching the crowd. He tells Simon, push out into some deeper water. This is when he's finished teaching. He tells him to push off into some deeper water and put your nets down and see what will happen. So that's what we'll look at next time. We'll see what happens. I encourage you to read it, and I'll have some comments about it. So we'll hopefully cover that part of chapter 5 and maybe go on a bit further on through the chapter. I want to kind of walk through these things a bit quickly because I feel that the earlier videos have set the stage for understanding who Jesus is. So we've got a good basis, a good platform for understanding why things are starting to happen the way they are in the story. And I think we should be able to move through it at a pretty good pace. So stay with us, stay with me, and hopefully this will be a great help to you, not only in terms of your own personal understandings, but in terms of the things that you can share with your family, if you've got children, with them, if you're part of a church, with people in your church community, if you get to lead a study with people who are part of a church who aren't revealing who Jesus is in your study. I hope this will be a great help to you. These are the kinds of things that I'm ultimately aiming at in terms of this series. That's the purpose for the work that I'm doing in these videos. So again, I hope it's a great help to you. I will see you next time. In the meantime, be well, and God bless you. Bye-bye.